All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about the psychology of selling.
Okay.
And we're going to be going pretty deep on Brian Tracy's book on this.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. When people think of sales, they think of closing techniques and, all these tricks and tips and that sort of thing. But Tracy's work really gets at the deeper level of what's going on.
Mindset. Yeah, absolutely. It's the internal game.
Right. And that really separates the people who are just good, from the people who are at the top of their game, the top performers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what's so interesting about, Tracy's perspective, and we'll really unpack for you today, is this idea that the real mastery in sales isn't about the external, tactics or strategies. It's really about understanding yourself and mastering your own internal landscape. He makes this great analogy where he says the same wind blows on all ships, but it's the set of the sails that determines the course. And in sales, your internal sales, your beliefs, your confidence, those are really the determining factors in terms of your success.
Yeah. And, to illustrate this, there's an anecdote from Tracy's early days in sales where he was working incredibly hard. He was putting in the early mornings, the late nights, just, really grinding it out.
Right.
But the results just weren't there. And then he noticed this colleague.
Oh, interesting.
Who kind of worked, you seemed like he was working fewer hours, having these, more relaxed conversations.
Yeah.
And yet he was just crushing it. He was just blowing everyone else's numbers out of the water.
That anecdote is so powerful because it gets right to the heart of what we're talking about here. It wasn't more brute force effort, right? This top salesperson, he had a different almost operating system.
Right.
As Tracy dug into this further, he discovered that the key differentiator for this salesperson was professional sales training that this person had received.
Oh, okay.
And it really highlights the idea that learning and the right techniques can be exponentially more effective than just simply trying harder.
Right. Working smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it really makes you think about how we often focus on the tangible aspects, like product features, market conditions, these more external factors. But we often overlook the immense power of our own mindset.
Absolutely.
And our learned skills.
Totally.
And now, when we talk about sales, this might seem like a niche topic, but Tracy's work really points out that selling in its broadest sense is really the engine, like the engine that powers our economy.
Yeah, it's the driving force. It's the he quotes Calvin Coolidge. He says, "The business of America is business."
Yeah.
And if we really think about your world, right? Like every successful company, every thriving industry, it's all built on this foundation of sales.
Yeah.
It's the engine that powers our financial markets. And think about it, it's the taxes generated by these, sales-driven entities that fund the public services we rely on. Schools, hospitals, infrastructure, all of these things are ultimately fueled by sales in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Even, advancements in technology and innovation.
Absolutely.
All of that often hinges on the ability to effectively sell those new ideas and products to, to a market, to investors.
Right. And it's not just about the macro level, right? It's about individual success. Tracy points out that a significant majority, around 3 out of 4, I think, self-made millionaires are entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And for an entrepreneur, right, the ability to sell their vision, their product, their service, this is absolutely non-negotiable. He argues that you can outsource many functions in a business. You can get other people to do things for you, but the core ability to sell, that's something that really is critical for an entrepreneur's survival and growth.
Can't really escape it.
You really can't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And beyond entrepreneurship, about 5% of self-made millionaires are actually salespeople. Working within companies.
Okay.
And what's particularly noteworthy for you is that top performers in sales today can achieve income levels that surpass many professions that require years of advanced education. And unlike, many traditional careers with salary ceilings and things like that, in sales, if you're well trained and you're offering value in the right market, your income potential is virtually unlimited.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. And that really kind of brings us to that very important concept that Tracy introduces really early on in the book, which is the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle.
Yeah.
And what he learned was that the top 20% of salespeople in any given company, or really any field, earn a staggering 80% of the total income.
It's incredible.
And the bottom 80% of salespeople are left to compete for the remaining 20%.
Yeah.
And for Tracy, this was kind of a real pivotal realization. It's like, okay, well that's where I want to be. I want to be in that top 20%.
It's a huge wake-up call. Yeah. This 80-20 distribution, it may seem unfair, but it's a consistent pattern, right? Like we see this, you see this across many fields, but in sales particularly, the income disparity can be absolutely huge. Yeah. Tracy mentions that on average, that top 20% earns 16 times what the bottom 80% do.
Wow.
And even more strikingly, right?
Yeah.
The top 4% can earn 16 times more than even that bottom 20%.
Oh, wow.
So you're talking about a massive difference.
That's
in earning power.
Yeah, that really puts it into perspective.
Absolutely.
And I think that really frames our mission for you for this deep dive.
Yeah.
You have to understand what are the underlying principles, what are the things that are allowing that top 20% to achieve such disproportionate success.
Exactly.
Tracy even shares an example of an insurance company where individual agents were consistently outselling entire teams of salespeople.
Wow.
Even when they were offering the exact same products under the exact same market conditions.
Right. That's a powerful example because it really, hammers home the point that it's not just about these external factors.
Right.
Something else is going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really brings us to, I think, the first fundamental area that Tracy explores in this book is this idea that true and lasting success in sales really originates from within.
Absolutely.
It's not about some, innate talent you're born with.
Right.
It's the qualities of top salespeople are learnable. They're cultivatable. You can develop them.
Yeah. It's not about having the gift of gab or
right. Something you're just born with.
Right. It's not about that.
Yeah. He even cites a Harvard study involving thousands of salespeople. And they concluded that the primary determinants of success or failure in sales were consistently mental qualities.
Yeah.
So, possessing certain psychological characteristics made individuals significantly more likely to thrive in sales.
Yeah.
Regardless of their background or other factors.
Right. And what this comes down to is the power of your beliefs. Right? And particularly your self-concept.
Right.
Think of your self-concept as your internal reputation.
Okay.
It's what you fundamentally believe to be true about yourself.
Yeah.
And Tracy explains that, this is largely subjective, right? Like it's built on your own thoughts and opinions about yourself. And often it contains these limiting beliefs that can act as invisible barriers to your success.
Yeah. That little voice of self-doubt.
Absolutely.
It's so powerful.
Right.
Yeah. And Tracy quotes William James, who says, belief creates the actual fact.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah. So, if you harbor beliefs about your limitations, then you're subconsciously going to act in ways that reinforce those limitations.
Absolutely.
And ultimately shape your reality.
Totally. And Louise Hay, who Tracy also mentions in the book, she identified a core issue for many people as this feeling of, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Which, can be particularly crippling when it comes to, that critical moment of closing a sale.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can just feel it.
You can.
That lack of confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actively cultivating self-esteem then becomes really paramount.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Tracy really draws this direct line between, liking yourself, possessing high self-esteem, and having a positive self-concept, and how these internal states translate to improve performance across every stage of the sales process, right? Like from that initial outreach all the way to securing the deal.
Yeah. And here's what Tracy calls the greatest discovery.
Okay.
And it sounds almost, simplistic, but it's really profound, which is you become what you think about most of the time.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's simple, but it's so true.
Right. So, if your internal dialogue, is dominated by negative self-talk,
right.
Well, that's probably the reality that you're going to experience.
Yeah.
But conversely, if you focus on positive, successful thoughts,
right, that can
actually reshape your outcomes.
Yeah. And he specifically highlights the power of this affirmation, I like myself.
Okay.
Which, it's more than just the positive sentiment itself. Psychologically repeating, I like myself, over and over. It can actually trigger this biochemical response in your brain, leading to the release of endorphins, right? Which are associated with feelings of confidence and well-being. So he really encourages you to become your own, his advocate, your own cheerleader,
right.
by consciously and regularly repeating this affirmation.
Yeah, he even shares, his own practice of repeating this affirmation countless times throughout the day.
Yeah.
Until it became, deeply embedded in his subconscious.
Wow. Yeah, and this internal shift, right? It has a very tangible external effect. And this leads to another key insight, which is the best time to make a sale is often right after you've just made one.
Oh, interesting.
And the reason for this is because that surge of self-esteem and confidence you feel after a successful transaction, it's not just a fleeting emotion. It has a powerful carryover effect on your subsequent interactions.
Right.
So you approach the next prospect with this winner's mindset, and that positive energy can be palpable.
Yeah.
And it can even subconsciously influence their receptiveness to your offering.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. You're riding that high.
You are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Tracy even notes that salespeople sometimes experience, these clusters of sales in a single day. And this is directly linked to this, temporary elevation of their self-concept.
Yeah. So it's not that, the product suddenly became better or, the market conditions drastically shifted or you stumbled upon, a magical list of perfect customers.
Right.
The primary change is internal.
It is. It's within you.
Yeah. So it really reinforces this idea that success breeds success.
Absolutely.
Each positive outcome strengthens your belief in your abilities.
Yeah.
It's kind of a virtuous cycle where, increased confidence leads to more sales, which leads to even more confidence.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it just kind of snowballs from there.
Yeah. But we also need to acknowledge, the common mental hurdles that can derail even the most capable salespeople.
Right.
And Tracy really identifies two primary internal adversaries to sales success.
Yeah.
The first is the fear of failure, and the second is the fear of rejection.
Yeah. I mean, those are big ones.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Yeah. And the fear of failure, this is often, deeply rooted in past experiences, maybe even childhood criticism. Yeah. And it can manifest as just paralysis. It can prevent you from taking the necessary actions to move forward.
Totally. And then the fear of rejection, right? Like that almost visceral aversion to hearing the word no. It's so salient in sales because, as Tracy points out, a significant percentage, maybe like 80% or so of your initial contacts might not result in a sale.
Yeah.
So rejection is an inherent part of the process.
Right.
But if you harbor this intense fear of it, it can become, profoundly debilitating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He actually paints a really vivid picture of the unproductive day of a salesperson who's kind of, trapped in that bottom 20%.
Yeah.
You know, and it's often characterized by procrastination on crucial activities like prospecting, and very minimal face-to-face time with potential customers.
Right.
And he links this directly to the fear of rejection.
Yeah.
It's like a break.
It's a subconscious break.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then he poses this really thought-provoking question.
He says, imagine you had a guaranteed list of prospects who were virtually certain to buy.
Right.
How dramatically would your activity level increase if that fear of rejection was completely removed?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You'd
be a selling machine.
Yeah. You'd be engaging with customers, potential customers almost constantly.
Right.
And so it really illustrates, how much this fear
absolutely
can limit our activity.
Totally. And to combat this, Tracy offers this fantastic almost mantra-like phrase. He says, some well, some won't, so what? Next.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Next. It's simple, but it's so effective as a way to detach yourself emotionally from, individual outcomes and just maintain a focus on consistent action and moving forward.
Right.
And he emphasizes, that boldness and persistence. Yeah. These aren't innate traits. These are habits that grow stronger with practice.
Yeah, the more you do it, the more comfortable you become.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this persistence is absolutely critical.
Totally.
Particularly when it comes to following up with prospects.
Yeah.
Tracy highlights a key statistic, which is that 80% of sales are typically not closed before the fifth interaction or closing attempt.
Okay.
But yet, the majority of salespeople, they tend to give up. Far earlier in the process.
Right. Especially when you're trying to, win over a customer who's already working with a competitor.
Yeah.
It can often take multiple visits just to build trust.
Yeah.
And overcome that inertia, right?
Right.
Of working with someone else.
So really, I mean, this is just a crucial reminder.
Absolutely.
Is that those who consistently make those multiple follow-up attempts, they significantly increase their chances of success.
Absolutely.
And this persistence is often fueled by enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Tracy talks about how there's this direct correlation between your own self-esteem and your level of enthusiasm.
Totally. Yeah. If you're excited about your product or service, that's going to come through.
Right. Yeah. And it can be contagious, right?
Absolutely.
If you're enthusiastic about it, it helps the prospect to become more enthusiastic about it as well.
Absolutely. And underpinning all of this, right, is this vital element of willpower and just unwavering determination.
Yeah.
Tracy stresses the importance of making this conscious decision to never give up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
When you cultivate that mental resilience and you commit to pushing through those challenges, you're far better equipped to bounce back from those setbacks and ultimately achieve those sales goals.
Yeah. And to further prepare yourself for success, Tracy talks about mental rehearsal.
Okay.
So this is a really it's a valuable technique.
Yeah.
He encourages you to engage in positive self-talk before interacting with prospects. Use affirmations like I am a capable salesperson and this is going to be a productive conversation.
Right.
And what he's saying is that this proactive internal programming can actually positively influence your subconscious actions, your voice, even your body language during those interactions.
Right. So you're essentially priming yourself for a more confident and effective encounter.
Yeah. And to maintain that positive momentum in setting clear and specific goals is really indispensable.
Yes. Yeah.
Tracy talks about the necessity of establishing a concrete annual income target, and crucially writing it down.
Yeah.
Without a clearly defined objective, your efforts are inevitably going to lack focus and direction.
Right.
He uses this great analogy. He compares it to trying to hit a target that's shrouded in fog.
Okay.
No matter how skilled you are, you can't hit what you can't see.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So he advises setting goals that are ambitious, but still realistic.
Yeah.
Maybe aiming to increase your previous highest income by a significant but achievable percentage, like 25-50%, for example.
Right. And he points out, that top performing salespeople, they typically have a very clear understanding of their daily targets.
Right. Of what they need to do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And complementing the power of goal setting is the synergistic effect of visualization and affirmations.
Right. So Tracy, he explains that your subconscious mind, it's particularly receptive to vivid mental images and strong affirmative statements.
Right.
And so he recommends that you regularly visualize successful interactions with prospects. Picture them making that positive buying decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And he circles back to that fundamental affirmation.
Yes.
I like myself.
Yeah.
Reiterating its power as this kind of all-purpose tool for building self-confidence.
Yeah.
And he even shares this really inspiring story of a salesman who was consistently a top performer. And he attributed much of his success to this daily practice of affirmations.
Wow.
Things like "I'm the best."
Yeah.
Coupled with these, vivid mental visualizations of successful outcomes.
That's powerful stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, now shifting our focus from the internal to the external, Tracy underscores that truly professional selling begins with a deep and thorough understanding of the customer's needs.
Okay.
He argues that you're not really engaging in effective selling until you've asked insightful questions, you've actively listened to identify the prospect's, most pressing need that your product or service can address.
Right.
And at the core of these needs, Tracy identifies two primary driving forces behind all buying decisions.
Okay.
And these are the desire for gain and the fear of loss.
Okay.
And interestingly, he states that the fear of loss is a significantly more potent motivator.
Oh, wow.
He suggests maybe about 2.5 times more powerful than the allure of potential gain.
So you're saying that people are more motivated to avoid pain than they are to seek pleasure.
Exactly. And so this has significant implications for how you frame your value proposition, right? It's not just about articulating how the customer will benefit from purchasing your offering. It's equally, if not more important, to clearly demonstrate what they risk losing or missing out on by not making the purchase.
Okay. So you have to paint both sides of the picture.
You really do.
Yeah.
Okay. And